So, this is the story about the infamous Icebox murders. The first thing Houston Police Captain Charles Bullock noticed as he entered 1815 Driscoll Street on the evening of June 23rd, 1965, was that someone didn't want him to use the back door of that house. Flower pots had been stacked up against the entrance, forcing Bullock and his partner, L.M. Barda, to push their way inside. While Barda moved through the rest of the home, Bullock headed towards the kitchen. The two were there to perform a welfare check on the house's occupants, an elderly couple named Fred and Edwina Rogers. Their nephew, Marvin Martin, had grown concerned when he failed to reach them by the telephone, and became further alarmed after knocking on the door with no answer, so he called the police. As he walked into the kitchen, something nagged at Bullock. He would later recall that the scene just didn't feel right. There are contradictory accounts of what happened next. Some say he saw food stacked up on top of the fridge rather than inside the refrigerator, so he got curious. Others say that he was thirsty for a beer on a hot summer evening and wanted to see if there was anything to drink, which I don't think is so likely because you're doing a welfare check on someone, so why would you sit down for a beer? So Bullock himself would say he peered inside the refrigerator for no particular reason. "I don't know why I looked in the refrigerator," he said. "For some reason, I just opened it." So he took a quick inventory of its contents, which appeared to be nothing but shelf after shelf of hog meat. He concluded the Rogers family must have been to the butcher recently, but with the house empty, it looked like it would spoil. "This is a shame," Bullock thought. "Someone is letting a whole bunch of good meat go to waste." He started to close the door when something caught his eye. Inside the vegetable drawer, which was what appeared to be a woman's head, her eyes fixed in Bullock's direction. Bullock froze. He slammed the freezer door shut. When he opened it, the head was still there. So he thinks he's imagining things because he didn't expect to see a head looking at him through the refrigerator door. The hog meat would turn out to be the flesh of a different sort. The dismembered remains of Fred and Edwina Rogers, drained of blood and missing their entrails. Fred's head was in the other crisper. His eyes had been gouged out. The gruesomeness of the crime scene would have been disturbing no matter what. Making it slightly worse was the fact that the autopsies showed the murders had been committed on Father's Day. And the person most likely to know something about this horrific act was the elderly couple's son, Charles. Charles, unfortunately, was nowhere to be found. Fred Rogers was 81. He was a retired real estate salesman. His wife, Edwina, 79, was a sales representative. Their Houston home and their activities appeared unremarkable to the neighbors, but there was an element to their lives that came as something of a surprise to local residents, who would later be questioned by the police. The surprise was that Charles lived with them, with his parents. In fact, he owned the house his parents lived in. Charles was 43 and a veteran of World War II. After getting a bachelor's degree in nuclear physics from the University of Houston, he had enlisted in the Navy and learned to fly planes, which is kind of like, I know people who fly planes in the Navy, that you have to be like really, really smart. It's like a really high level of the Navy, so he must have been really smart. He became a seismologist and later spent 9 years working for the Shell Oil Company. At the time of his parents' death, it was not clear whether he was employed. What was clear was that Charles was a peculiar individual. He would rise before dawn, leaving the house to tend to unknown business before his parents woke up, and then come back after dark, after they went to bed. His travels were so subtle that the next-door neighbors was not even aware that he lived there. Well, I guess he's coming back and forth at the times when most people would be sleeping. When he was home, he went out of his way to avoid his parents, purportedly slipping notes under the doors when he needed to communicate with them. The family maid would later state that it was possible Edwina had not even seen Charles face to face for roughly 5 years prior to her death. So no one was sure what led to the unusual frigid living arrangements. It's possible Charles wanted to provide for his elderly parents in spite of either not getting along with them or wishing not to be disturbed by the outside world. Either way, it was now imperative that he answer questions about their gruesome fates. When Bullock discovered the corpses, he and his partner Barta practically sprinted out the house, calling investigators to the scene. They found the house had been mostly scrubbed clean, save for some blood in the bathroom, where they believed the bodies had been cut up, and Charles' attic bedroom, where there were trace amounts of blood as well as a hand saw they believed had been used to perform the dismemberment. The heads, torsos, and limbs were in the refrigerator. The entrails were found in the sewer system, apparently having been flushed down the toilet. Other body parts were missing and never found. So it looks like he cut off their vaginal areas, owning to the labor involved in draining the bodies, carving up the corpses, and cleaning the home. Police believed that the killer had taken his or her time and had working knowledge of human anatomy. Autopsies revealed that Edwina had died as a result of a single gunshot to the head, though that weapon was never found. Fred had gotten the worst of it. He had been beaten to death with a claw hammer and his eyes plucked out and his genitals severed from his torso in what seemingly a vindictive mutilation. The claw hammer was found on the premises, though police would not confirm whether or not any fingerprints were retrieved. So, if there was evidence, authorities wanted to discuss it with Charles. They issued an all-point bulletin and launched a nationwide search for Charles. As the only presumably living member of the household, his insight, if not his confession, would have been invaluable. Because he knew how to fly, authorities checked nearby airfield to see if anyone matching his description had left the area by plane. Nothing turned up. In being so reclusive, Charles left virtually no trail for them to follow. The habits and manners of the missing son are major mysteries, Captain L.D. Morrison, head of the local homicidal bureau, told reporters a few days after the bodies had been found. It was an understatement. Police never located Charles, not in the weeks, months, or years that followed. In 1975, in an effort to probate the Rogers estate, he was declared legally dead. One of Houston's scariest, goriest murders would become one of the most notorious unsolved cases. But that hasn't stopped others from stepping forward and offering their theories about what may have transpired. Some are outlandish, using the blank canvas of the crime scene to try and attach deeper meaning to Charles' life. The 1992 book, The Man on the Grassy Knoll, by the authors John R. Craig and Philip A. Rogers, offered that Charles was actually a CIA operative involved in the 1963 assassination of John F. Kennedy. When his parents discovered incriminating diary entries, Charles killed him. So that's one theory. The Icebox Murders in a 2003 book written by forensic accountants and amateur sleuths, Hugh and Martha Gardiner, made an attempt to present a more plausible theory. They agreed Charles was indeed the killer, but his motive was not the result of a CIA involvement. Instead, the Gardiners argued that Fred and Edwina were abusive and manipulative parents, doing everything from taking loans out against their son's home to forging his signature on deeds to other properties he owned. After years of being browbeaten and financially ripped off, Charles lashed out in an orgy of violence, smashing his father's head in that his mother got a comparatively compassionate execution-style killing may point to most of the abuse coming from the father, Fred. The Gardiners asserted that, according to most crime investigators, they all say that this kind of killing would be a very personal killing, because usually someone close to the person that has that much anger to do what they did. It had to be someone close to them to have that personal anger, because what he did was very personal. So the Gardeniers asserted that a few days after the murders, someone matching Charles' physical description was overheard asking about a job overseas using an alias. They claimed that Charles utilized his contacts in the oil and mining industry to land in Mexico. The book also, that's very possible, I think, because Mexico is a very easy place to disappear in. The book also asserts that Charles met a very violent end of his own when a wage dispute involving some miners in Honduras ended with a pickaxe lodged in his head. So they don't really know what happened to Charles. It's just an assumption. The Houston Press labeled the Gardeniers' book a work of fact-based fiction and supposition, leaving its conclusion up in the air. No concrete evidence appears to point to Charles winding up in Central America, though he did at one point own his own plane. Fleeing Houston via aircraft seems plausible. And with the Shell Oil job taking him to Canada and Alaska, it is also possible that he had contacts in another country that could have made him setting up a new life easier for him. Decades later, it's unlikely the case will ever find resolution. If Charles Rogers did not commit the crime, his disappearance is inexplicable. No one else appeared to have motive to kill his parents. If he was killed by an unknown third party, the perpetrator did an excellent job removing all traces of him, whether he ended up in Central America or somewhere else. The most likely explanation is that he spent the rest of his days doing what he's so often practiced at 1815 Driscoll, disappearing into the shadows unnoticed by the rest of the world. So his parents got killed, and then he's disappeared. They must have put a missing persons report. Like he must have gone up on the list of missing persons, because if he wasn't the killer, then something bad might have happened to him as well, right? So can't really know, right? So that's the story about the icebox killer. On to the next story. Excuse my voice because I have the flu. And goodbye.